I knew we were in over our heads the moment I saw him standing there. He wasn't yelling, he wasn't angry, not outwardly anyway. But the calm in his voice, the way he tilted his head as if he was deciding what to do with us, was far more terrifying than any outburst could ever be. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't part of the plan. But as I stood there, my heart pounding and my lover frozen beside me, I realized that we had made the worst mistake of our lives. And now, there was no way out. It started like all bad decisions do, with a moment of weakness, an electric glance, a stolen kiss. My husband had been distant for months, lost in his work and barely noticing me. And then there was Eric. Eric was everything my husband wasn't: charming, adventurous, and just the right amount of dangerous. He had a way of making me feel alive, of reminding me of the woman I used to be before I got buried under the weight of responsibilities and routine. We tried to keep things casual at first. A few drinks here, a few late-night texts there, but it didn't take long for our connection to spiral into something far more intense. "I don't want to ruin your life," he said one night as we sat in his car, parked on the side of a dark, empty road. "You're not," I whispered, even though we both knew that wasn't true. But I didn't care. All I knew was that when I was with him, I felt like I could breathe again. The trouble began a few months into our affair. Eric was always looking for a thrill, always chasing that next adrenaline rush. He had connections, people I didn't know, people I didn't want to know. And one night, he brought me into his world in a way I never expected. "We're meeting someone tonight," he said casually as we drove through the city. "Meeting someone?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "Don't worry," he said with that mischievous grin that always disarmed me. "It's just a quick favor, in and out." I should have said no. I should have told him to turn the car around and take me home. But instead, I nodded, telling myself that it was just one night. One little secret to add to the growing pile. The man we met was nothing like I expected. His name was Victor, and he was older, polished, with an air of authority that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. He greeted Eric like an old friend, but when his eyes landed on me, I felt like I was being weighed, measured, and judged all at once. "This her?" Victor asked, his voice smooth and quiet. Eric nodded, wrapping an arm around my waist. "This is Lily." Victor's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "Pleasure to meet you, Lily." I forced a smile, but my unease grew with every passing second. There was something about Victor that felt off. The favor was simple, too simple, in hindsight. Eric handed over a small package, and Victor handed him an envelope in return. No words were exchanged, but the tension in the air was palpable. As we walked back to the car, I finally spoke up. "What was that about?" "Nothing you need to worry about," Eric said, his tone dismissive. "Eric, if I'm involved, I deserve to know." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's nothing, just business. Victor's let's call him a fixer. He helps people solve problems. That's all." But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. For a while, things went back to normal, or as normal as they could be when you're sneaking around with someone who isn't your husband. But then, a few weeks later, Eric showed up at my door, his face pale and his hands trembling. "We have a problem," he said. "What kind of problem?" I asked, my stomach dropping. "Victor," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "He thinks we crossed him." "Crossed him? How?" Eric hesitated, his eyes darting around the room as if Victor might materialize out of thin air. "The package, it wasn't what he expected. He thinks I set him up." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Did you?" "No," Eric said quickly. "Of course not, but someone did, and now he's looking at me, at us." The next few days were a nightmare. Eric was paranoid, jumping at every shadow, every unexpected knock at the door. And I couldn't blame him. Victor had a reputation, one that I only fully understood after doing a little digging of my own. He wasn't just a fixer. He was a power broker, the kind of man who operated in the shadows, pulling strings and making problems disappear. And when someone crossed him, they disappeared too. I begged Eric to go to the police, to come clean and let them handle it, but he refused. "You don't understand," he said, his voice shaking. "Victor has people everywhere. If we go to the cops, it'll only make things worse." I started to feel like I was being watched. Every time I left the house, I had the eerie sensation that someone was following me, their eyes burning into my back. I told myself I was being paranoid, but the feeling wouldn't go away. And then, one night, my worst fears were confirmed. I was in bed, trying to sleep, when I heard a noise downstairs. My heart leapt into my throat as I grabbed my phone and crept toward the door. "Eric?" I whispered, even though I knew he wasn't there. The silence that followed was deafening. I slowly made my way down the stairs, my hands trembling as I clutched the banister. When I reached the living room, I saw him. Victor. Sitting in my chair, his legs crossed and a faint smile on his lips. "Hello, Lily," he said, his voice calm and measured. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. "How did you get in here?" He shrugged, as if the answer didn't matter. "We need to talk." Victor wasn't angry, he wasn't threatening, but that only made him more terrifying. He told me that he knew everything, about me, about Eric, about the package. He told me that I was in this just as much as Eric was, that I couldn't just walk away. "You made a mistake," he said, his voice low and steady. "And now, you're going to fix it." I wanted to argue, to tell him that I had nothing to do with it. But the words wouldn't come. Because deep down, I knew he was right. The next few weeks were a blur. Victor had us running errands for him, delivering packages, meeting with people I didn't want to know. It was like we were his puppets, dancing to his tune, with no way out. Eric tried to stay strong, but I could see the fear in his eyes every time Victor called. And as much as I hated to admit it, I was scared too. We were trapped, caught in a web of our own making, with no idea how to escape. The breaking point came one night when Victor asked us to do something we couldn't, something that crossed a line we weren't willing to cross. Eric tried to refuse, but Victor's calm smile quickly turned into something darker. "You don't have a choice," he said, his voice like ice. But we did. Eric and I made a decision that night. We would run. We didn't have a plan, didn't know where we would go, but we knew we couldn't stay. We packed our bags, left everything behind, and disappeared into the night. But as we drove away, the weight of what we'd done lingered. We knew Victor wouldn't let us go so easily. And as the headlights cut through the darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over.